Hey patrons, today I wanted to share some workshop techniques with you. I thought it'd be cool if we started with foam, since it doesn't just represent the underpinnings of most costumes, but it was one of the first materials to be commercially utilized for FX purposes from the mother's basement of around the house items. Foam makes up the bulk of costume supplies around the shop. With fursuits, the amount needed has dropped since the advent of resin heads, although I still use it for my foam heads, obviously, when an appropriate resin blank is unavailable or upon request to the client. For effects, I find that expanding foams are a great filler, and I end up utilizing them more, but for bodies, sheet foam is still the best thing on the market for shaping. It's ubiquitous in this field. Monsters in movies are predominantly foam, when they aren't CGI anyways, and most at-home costumes utilize it at least a little bit, if not most of what they do. So let's start with this stuff. This is Antifatigue matting. You may recognize it. You can buy it from Walmart, or not Walmart, maybe Walmart where you're at. I get it from Home Depot. They come in big sheets, maybe 3 feet by 3 feet squares. You have to trim the edges off because they're puzzle pieces, but you still end up with a whole lot of usable area. This stuff is really hard, but, well, firm. It bends really well, and you can heat shape it to a number of shapes to suit you. This pauldron I made roughly. I made it quickly because of course I did. Was for a post-apocalypse LARP, and this is entirely, you can see that foam on the inside. But it's very sturdy, and it's great for LARPing if you plan on doing that. It can take a couple of blows. The paint job might get scuffed a little bit, but resilient, and yeah, it'll last you a while. It adheres great with hot glue, rubber cement, whatever you like. You can score it and then heat shape it, and it'll kill most of the, what the hell do you call that stuff? The dandruff, when you score something. Great job. You'll end up with these little tiny, I don't know if you can see them, like little tiny flakes. Maybe if I go deeper. There we go. You get these little irregularities. If you use a sharp knife, that doesn't happen, but depending on how much foam you displace, you'll end up with those. But you can use a heat gun, and it'll melt it all down so it's nice and smooth. And it's great. You can sand this with a Dremel if you're careful. It's just great all around. A lot of furries use this for the bottoms of feet. I usually would suggest using this side because it's meant to grip onto the floor, whereas this side is nicely put a death trap. I mean, I'm sure it works fine for some people. I, however, being someone who can be sued, would not do it. So take that as you will. The next foam is this stuff. This is basically craft foam, just a little bit thicker. Like, I think it's branded Foamies at Michael's and Joann's. This stuff is fucking awesome. This is what, if you can get it thick enough, this is what effects professionals use. This stuff bends like a dream. You can get, like with this one, you can tell that some force needs to be applied, and you've got these little wrinkly dinks on the back, and you can end up with some uneven, like rounded edges. You'll end up more with, like I tried to do a round edge on this, and you can see that it's not perfectly round. I did the best I could, but oh well. With this, you can get perfectly round and perfectly spherical. It's much softer. You could probably use this for LARPs, but this is, it will not tear, but separate if enough force is applied. So I would use it for no contact LARPing if that's what you're going to do. What it can be used for is making some really gorgeous armor. Kamui Cosplay, I think, uses this. I know she uses this stuff, which we'll get to. So I could be wrong. But if you are familiar with her stuff, yeah, this is also used in the effects industry quite widely. A lot of the monsters that you see are this stuff. They'll make different forms and glue them together. It's just all around good. If you want something to feel bony when someone touches it, like under fur or fabric or something, you can use this to really good effect because it's not super hard, but it will contrast really nicely with what's under it. Here is the bread and butter. Oh, look at that. Don't worry, not poop, not wiping my ass with it. This is silicone from the werewolf I was working on. Delightful. Don't mind me. This is upholstery foam, or polyurethane foam. It comes in different densities, which means what it is it's a liquid that's poured into a shaping tub. And the more liquid you pour in, the more of these little bubbles you get, and the denser it is. This is kind of like a good loaf of white bread. So this is medium density. Low density stuff just feels terrible. You know, it just has no loft to it whatsoever. High density stuff can be like about as squishy as this, but a little more airy inside, if you get my drift. This stuff is great. You can mark on it really easily, so it makes it good for patterning stuff out. It's a little happy animal face. Now I'm going to finish this. Good enough. Makes it really good for making notes while you're doing something. It folds really easily. It can be made into different forms. It scrunches up and will hold its shape. Hot glues really easily. You can rubber cement it, hot glue it, cold glue it. You can use liquid latex to hold it together because it's porous. Pretty much anything. You could even use liquid silicone to bond this together. You know, if you felt like having $200 glue. It's great. Everything will bond it to itself, basically. The only problem I have with this is when, say, here we go. Say you've got like a plastic claw or something, right? Let's say this is the inside of a foot or something, and you want to glue it on there. Fuck no, that's not going to happen because the glue will adhere to this stuff, which is super springy, and this, which is super hard, so the springiness that'll just rip right out. So don't do that. Gosh, what else can you do with this stuff? If it's high density, you can use a Dremel to smooth it a little bit. You just have to be super careful because, you know, if it's not the right density, the Dremel will catch and it'll just tear big chunks out. Gosh, this is really the good stuff. This is the bread and butter that you're going to be using for everything. When you have to make bodysuits with muscles or different shapes to that of the wearer, this is the stuff to use. It breathes a little tiny bit. Like these two don't breathe at all, so be prepared. This one breathes okay. I'd rather be in a suit made of this all day than one of those, because you'll probably die. You'll just get heat stroke in this. Gosh, what else? Oh, I forgot to mention, you can use rubber cement to bond this together. You can use hot glue, but it's not quite as good. Sorry, didn't mean to forget about that. Alright, so there's 3, and now, this isn't really a foam. This is something called Wonderflex, which is sold commercially, and it's basically a thermoplastic that you heat up with a heat gun, and then you can fold it into any number of shapes, and it cools hard. This is the thing Kamui Cosplay uses for everything. I like to use this for horns and just weird appendages. Like on my Gungan suit, I used it for almost her entire eye stalk. Once it's warm, it becomes the consistency of like taffy almost. You can stretch it if you apply force, but it'll show this. I don't know if you can see. It has a weave on the back of whatever the heck holds it together. Some kind of polymer, I'm sure. But you can use a tool and you can like push different shapes into it and make it look like wrinkles or whatever the heck you want. It's a great all-around use for armors. You could probably even make a resin blank out of this, although it would be a plastic blank at that point. What else? I don't know, it's just a good thing. It's really expensive, and it's hard to glue to itself. You have to use heat and a whole lot of patience, and probably a cupful of ice water to mend your poor burnt fingertips from pressing this shit together. I usually heat the edges until they're really not liquidy, but soft, and you'll be able to tell, and then you just press them together, and you can use a tool to score them together, although I find it doesn't really make much of a difference. You just have to get some of this shit and play with it until you really understand what's going on with this. But the learning curve is not hard. It's not high, whatever you say a learning curve is. Steep. It's not steep. And it can be really rewarding. So if you have an extra $70 sitting around, I suggest grabbing a sheet of this stuff and giving it a go. I know Cosplay Supplies carries it, but they overprice. I think you can get it from Wonderflex.com, maybe. I would just look up Wonderflex and look for a really official sounding site, and you should be good. Yeah, so these are the basic foams we use around the shop for everything, and yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this little explanation of what's going on. I will see you next time.